Thank you, everyone, for joining. I appreciate this is quite a packed 1 hour session, so I'll get straight into it. So let me introduce myself, Mohammed Marikar, and I am a Brokerage alumnus. I was on the Brokerage's City Business Traineeship program in 2004. I want to tell you a little bit about my history, as I think it kind of helps, also kind of ties into the story we have to tell you here. So I grew up in Camden. I grew up in a council estate in Camden, went to my local comprehensive school there, and my parents didn't go to university. And I was fortunate in that my parents, of course, understood the value of education and sort of pushed me to do better in school. But what they were unable to do was to open doors. And my first placement, for example, was at UBS, the Swiss bank. I had no idea this organization existed. Some of the speakers here, I'm seeing Brewin, Dolphin, for example, one of the most storied wealth management firms in the world. Again, I had no idea existed at that age. Similarly, the Royal Bank of Canada, the firm I work for now, I also had no idea existed. And we have this sort of kind of gap of understanding, when you're at that age, when you don't have connections in the city. And it was quite interesting doing my first placement because I saw a lot of my peers. And it was interesting to see how they had been introduced into the city, and there were often kind of connections where their mother's brother knew someone, so they were able to learn a bit more about the city and about the careers there. It was quite interesting. In the first role that I did, I was working in fixed income confirmations. Again, a role that I had no idea existed at a bank. I thought, banks were all about taking money in and, checking balances and doing mortgages and things like that. So I it's been over 15 years now, and I feel pretty old saying this, but I'm now a trustee of the brokerage, and I'm pretty excited to introduce this event today, because thinking back on about how I sort of grew my career, a lot of it did depend, of course, pre-pandemic, on being in the office. When you're young, when you're an intern, when you're a graduate, you have a bit of that license to go around and annoy people, introduce yourself, find out about what other businesses are doing, what other teams are doing, and network and find your place in the city. And we, of course, there are still barriers around perception, around access. And the pandemic has really sort of exacerbated that, because when you don't have those existing connections when you're coming into the city, you don't have those, unless kind of sessions are pre-organized for you, you don't have that access. You don't know who to reach out to. You can't grab people over coffee because all of a sudden it's got to be a scheduled meeting of at least 15 or 20 minutes. And I think we have an opportunity here to use this change in the way of working. We've already seen firms like Deloitte, for example, commit to completely flexible working in the future. RBC in our wealth management division, for example, in our new office, we actually have 20% less desks. So there's an assumption that a chunk of people will be working flexibly throughout the year. So we have this opportunity now, during this period of change, to make some structural change in the city. And when we build back, we have this opportunity to put in some structures now so that we build back better. So I'm super excited for you to hear about the Brokerage's Manifesto for a Fair and Inclusive Recovery, to hear what we're doing, to hear from our corporate partners as well, to address the concerns that young people have. So with that, I would like to introduce Katharina Rüdiger, our CEO. Katharina joined us 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, actually. And she immediately saw the wider potential for us as an organization to extend our reach as a change maker. So working with corporate partners to create those inclusive and fair working cultures rather than sort of just, responding to point problems. And of course, it'd been barely, half a year before COVID hit. And, as an organization where everything we did was face to face, we had to change pretty quickly. So I'm going to hand over to Katerina to explain.
Great, thank you, Mohammed, and I really appreciate you sharing this event today and all the other work you're doing for us. You really are the perfect example as to how much our alumni can bring to us, not just as an organization, but also in terms of supporting us in the wider system change that you just mentioned. And you are such a great role model for our candidates. And I'll be handing over very shortly to one of these exceptional candidates, Diana, who is already a role model in her own right. But before I do so, I just wanted to briefly share with you the following 3 things. First of all, our priorities as a charity and how we've developed and why we've developed our Changemaker work with corporates. Secondly, how we've adapted to the challenges. Mohammed mentioned that already a bit, that COVID posed to us and more importantly, our young people over the past 18 months. And then finally, of course, why we launched the manifesto and its specific ask. And I want to let you a little bit in behind the scenes as to how we co-created this with our young people and corporate partners. So back to our vision as a charity, as I hope you know, our vision is to create a world where a young person's ability alone determines their career path. And with that broad vision, we have 2 twin goals of equal importance that are supporting young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and working with employers. And as Mohammed said, that sort of addition about working with employers is quite a recent goal, but is just as important, because if we want to create that change in the world and not just help hundreds of talented young people into professional jobs, then that dual focus crucially enables us to have a much bigger and long-lasting impact by changing the system for generations to come. And to do that, we support corporates in their D&I journey and in their change of organizational practices and cultures to become more genuinely diverse and inclusive. So rather than telling our young people to fit the mold, we work with organizations committed to break that mold and create something new. And that's why last year we launched our Changemaker strand of work that it's very much still in development, as you would expect, but it has 4 different strands. One of them is, the first one is our youth consultancy, where we bring young people directly into organizations for some direct feedback for our corporates. The second one is more around training and advice, in particular for line managers. And then the third one is around bringing our corporate partners together for some peer-to-peer learning and best practice exchange, where we've, for example, run our corporate leaders forum over the last year. And finally, I'm very excited about this. We're launching our Young Leaders program this year, or in our current business year in September, where we support candidates to become leaders and change makers within organizations. And that's based on our successful ambassador model, which I'm sure Diana will tell you more about. And so just briefly back on the sort of past 18 months, as Mohammed said, there's been some incredible challenges, but actually it has been a very successful year for us as a charity, because we've used the disruption caused by the pandemic to innovate and to adapt and move forward as an organization, both in terms of our delivery and our offer to corporates and young people, but also in terms of driving some internal change to become a more modern and dynamic organization. And most of you have been involved in our Generation 2020, which we sort of launched last year in response to, having to shut out all our face-to-face programs and the uncertainty our young people face. And so that's been incredibly successful. We've helped over 300 young people over the summer with, online masterclasses, boot camps, and mentoring, and so on. And it's really become our blueprint for a hybrid delivery model that we are co-creating with our corporate partners and young people. So some of the face-to-face things we will reintroduce, and some of the online delivery we will keep. And that's really to ensure that, our post-COVID recovery works for our young people. And that really brings me to the last point, and really the reason why we're here today. So as Mohammed said, and I couldn't say it better, there's been some incredibly changes over the last 18 months. And I think, we are sort of at this moment in time where, we find ourselves at a kind of crossroads, and we really have an opportunity to rebuild a different world of work, and we must grab this opportunity with both hands. And that's the reason why we've launched the Manifesto. We didn't want to just stand by and see what happens. And I believe that our distinguishing feature as a charity is the quality of relationships that we have with our young people and employers. And so we really strive to be youth-led, and it's the voice of our young people and their lived experience that we will put forward to co-create with our corporate partners sustainable, innovative and practical solutions. So in order to develop the manifesto, we did exactly that. We worked with our young people, we surveyed them, but we've also worked with our corporate partners, and we held a forum around the manifesto and discussed, what employers should and wanted to commit to. And so the manifesto is very much a result of that co-creation process. And I'm not going to have the time to go through in detail through the asks, but I just wanted to kind of draw out 3 of the key asks. And the first one obviously has to be the ask for internships, and that's because that's something that came out really on top when we asked our candidates, our young people, what they wanted employers to do. And it's also very clear, that in order to, and Mohammed explained that beautifully again, in order to be able to access the world of work, you've got to have an experience, you've got to have a foot in the door. So it's really important, whether it be virtual, and we'll work very hard to make that happen and really good, and or face-to-face, we've got to have that experience of the working world. And the second point I wanted to talk about is the data collection. So that was one of the things that was the most hotly debated at our corporate forum, because obviously, there's some nervousness around it. Some corporates who are at the beginning of the journey, others are further advanced. I know, for example, Caroline from Brewin Dolphin might talk about her work in this area, but in the end, everyone felt that, what's measured gets done. And so if we're genuine about, committed to change, we've got to have some data element to it and really collect data on socioeconomic background and ethnicity and the employee experience and that. And, no matter where our corporate partners are in that journey, we're supporting them in that. And then the final point is the sort of training of line managers. And that's something, so whenever we start a corporate partnership now, I talk to the CEO of the organization and the senior leadership team, and the one thing that comes up is always, they say, we're very committed from the top to make that happen, but we need you to help us to support line managers who are already very busy. And so I'm very excited that next year we're going to really focus on supporting line managers in, understanding how to kind of recruit and develop and manage somebody from a different background and make that work. I could talk much more about it, but I shall leave it here and hand over to Diana, who is one of our ambassadors from last year and has done an amazing job. And she's one of the perfect examples of, what makes our candidates great, where they go above and beyond. She's launched with the other ambassadors their own podcast. She fed into a lot of our work, our consultations. She led our social media work. I could go on, but I will hand over from Diana so you can hear from her firsthand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katerina. Hi, everyone. It's just so lovely to be with you all today as an ambassador, discussing the impacts the pandemic has had on young people. Young people's lives have been affected tremendously by the pandemic, and these changes have brought about a lot of uncertainty and challenges, ranging from the cancellation of exams to the cancellations of opportunities such as internships. Speaking from my own personal experience, there's been many challenges the pandemic has brought me. For example, I remember how nerve-wracking it was waiting for my A-level results and waiting to see if I'd get into university or not. Luckily for me, I was able to get into university and study the course I wanted to do. However, I do know that for a lot of many young people, this wasn't the same case. So I have friends, for example, who have had to take gap years to repeat exams, but then were told that the exams were cancelled again. So there's like been a lot of uncertainty and challenges already that young people have had to face. In addition, for university students, we've had to complete most of our university studies online, which in some cases has its benefits, but also it has its negatives. Another aspect that was affected for me was internships. So I had applied for different internships, but then were told that they would be cancelled because of the pandemic, and like the recruitment process wouldn't continue. So I know this is also the case for many individuals who have missed out on a lot of opportunities. A study conducted by the brokerage determined that 89% of brokerage candidates are worried about the impacts of COVID-19 on their future career prospects. Additionally, more than half of the young people who participated in the study have changed or expect to change their education plan because of COVID-19. And from kind of researching even more into this, similar themes have been found by Young Minds, who highlight that young people are facing concerns in regards to their education, fears about the future, and in addition, loneliness and isolation. So these similarities demonstrate how the pandemic has affected young people negatively. In addition, young people's three biggest concerns as a result of the crisis are: 1, not being able to access work opportunities; 2, there being a lack of work experience opportunities; and lastly, not getting the qualifications they need to achieve their career ambitions. So from speaking to fellow peers, I have heard many individuals mention that they feel like they will never succeed or do not know what they want to do anymore. So it just already shows how much this the pandemic has like caused for like young people. And to conclude, from what I've seen and like studied, I really believe it's vital that employers listen and acknowledge these challenges that young people face in order to promote a healthy working practice within and offer opportunities within practices. So I hope this is kind of like given a good overview of some of the challenges young people face, and I'm really happy to answer some questions later on as well.
Thank you, Diana. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, Caroline Lake. So Caroline is Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Brewin Dolphin. She has been highly supportive of the Brokerage Changemaker strand of work, and she will share some of the innovative things that she's doing. And I will hand over to you, Caroline.
Great, thanks, Mohammed. Hi, everyone. Yes, so we've been working with the brokerage now for probably about 18 months, but for about 12 months in a full partnership. What we're trying to do, like many organisations, is actually, when we're talking about our commitment to diversity and inclusion, is actually turn that into action and real change. And so when we are looking for organisations to become members of or partner with, what we're looking for is something that can really help us to drive that change. So when a colleague talked to me about the brokerage, I felt like it was a bit of a no-brainer, really, to be honest with you. A bit of a why not rather than a why. And we've done work before with volunteering and working with young people, but it was much more of a one-off touch point, and then we might meet some other young people at another time. But we're really looking to build long-term change relationships that ultimately do result in people coming to work with Brewin Dolphin. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for future talent, and so that's what we're aiming to do. And Katerina says we work in partnership, and it really is a partnership. I feel I think there are things that we can give, and there are definitely things that we get from the brokerage as well that can help us with this work. So the opportunities to volunteer are that they're more than that, really. They're also opportunities for our people to meet young people who are potentially, not always, but potentially from different backgrounds, and learn about that and think about how then that impacts them in the workplace and how they need to then change as colleagues and managers to create that inclusive environment. It's also really helping people use their skills and experience. So we get such amazing feedback from our colleagues who volunteer with the brokerage, and we've got a cohort that just started a mentoring program at the moment, and they're just so excited about that work and actually feeling like they're adding value, longer term, hopefully, to somebody's development. I think as an industry, we have a challenge. I think, Mohammed, maybe you might have mentioned the perception, particularly of the financial services industry, and actually there are, such broad careers and so many different opportunities that people just don't know about. I mean, I also haven't heard of Brewin Dolphin before I started working for Brewin Dolphin. Your companies our sort of size aren't often household names. So we've got a responsibility, if we truly believe that we want to build a more diverse and inclusive culture, we've got a responsibility to get out there and let people know about us and not just wait for people to find us, because that won't automatically happen. So that's another reason why working with the brokerage is so beneficial, because it gives us an opportunity to do that and to show ourselves to people, let them see us, come and experience some of our people and find out what opportunity is available and what it's like to work here. And that, through masterclasses or the mentoring, or we have actually got 3 interns this summer that will be working in our research team. And, that was really interesting as well. I think the quality of the young people from the brokerage is amazing. So we originally were going to have 2 interns. We'd offered 2 spaces, and the team that were doing the interviews were just blown away and just couldn't decide. And they said, please, can we have a 3rd one? And we said, of course you can. They could have had more, in all honesty, as well, I think. So the quality is there, and who knows, hopefully maybe some of them will come and work for us in the future. So I think there really is this sort of 2-way street there. And just to talk about one of the other things we've done, just to get a greater insight. So we're currently looking at our careers website and our talent brand, and thinking about, how accessible is that to people, and how accessible are we when people maybe go and look at our website if they see a job vacancy or want to find out about us. So we put a questionnaire together and shared it with the brokerage, who sent it out to some of the young people to actually give us feedback on, would they want to come and work for us based on that? What did they like? What didn't they like? What was clear? What wasn't clear? And we're using that to actually develop our talent brand, to make sure that people see us as the kind of organisation that we believe we are when you get through the door, but would you actually come and knock on our door? So I think what's great is that we can explore those additional opportunities as well to truly change, how we are attractive to people from different backgrounds as well. So I'll probably stop there. I think that's my time up.
Thank you, Caroline. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Natasha Harrison. So Natasha founded the London office of Boies Schiller Flexner, and is the managing partner of that office. She's an English barrister specialising in high-value complex disputes. I find this really interesting because again, I think it goes back to what I remember, for starting my career. Like, if you read the Financial Times, you'll be familiar with this firm. But it's one of those firms that you don't hear about unless you're in the right area and reading the right things, right? So we're super pleased that Natasha has agreed to support the brokerage from the new school year, starting in September, as a member of our Changemaker board. So Natasha. Oh, sorry, I think you're on mute.
You would have thought I'd learned by now. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to be on the panel today. My firm has been supporting the brokerage for about 5-6 years now, and I was thrilled when we had the opportunity to get involved. And I was thrilled because, as part of my firm's strategy, both in the London office but also the deputy chair of the worldwide firm, I've put diversity, equality and inclusion at its heart. I believe diverse teams are more successful. I think diverse teams deliver better results for clients, but also it's socially right. It's the right thing to be doing. And I've been very much informed by my own background because despite current appearances, I grew up just outside Croydon, and Croydon was really less even rougher than it is today, I think, back then. I'm half Greek, half Irish. No one in the family, immediate family or otherwise, had ever gone to university. a bit like Mohammed. And I had no access to the city, to law firms or the like. I really had no idea where I would like to start. And those barriers that I faced as a young woman really seemed to be insurmountable. I wouldn't know how to apply, where to apply, what it would look like, and why would they want to go off on Croydon anyway. And it was actually my GCSE maths teacher who I was chatting to one day and said I was potentially interested in a career in law. And her husband was a barrister, and she very kindly introduced me and I was given some work experience. But without that introduction and that insight through my maths teacher, who felt a bit sorry for me, I would never have got that access to the law. It would have continued to be a mystery to me. And I doubt I would have had the career today that I have today. So I feel very passionately, both from my own experience, but also as a businesswoman in diversity, equality and inclusion, and particularly passionately about social diversity and driving change. And it was interesting listening to Diana earlier talking about the impact of COVID, because my driving concern is that it's going to increase that social divide even further between the haves and the have-not. You know, those children who have the laptops, those who didn't have laptops for online learning, those children who have access to the city and internship, those children who won't, which is why I was really privileged and delighted to be asked to sit on the board from September. And we have partnered, as I say, for 5 to 6 years now with the brokerage. I'd agree with Caroline, the quality of the interns is extraordinary. And out of all the initiatives that we get involved with, charitable initiatives, without doubt, the brokerage is the most popular amongst our lawyers and amongst our staff as well, whether it's mentoring, whether it's teaching, whether it's giving introductions to different aspects of the business with the internships as well. It's incredibly rewarding, and it enables us to learn about the generation coming up, about their challenges and opportunities, and to provide them with an environment where they can learn what it's like to sit in an office, to interact with people, to look at the framework of what we do. So it's incredibly rewarding in that respect as well. So both from my personal experience, but as a businesswoman as well, we are deeply committed to the brokerage and the work it does. It's important work, and it's never been as important as it is now following on COVID. And we're looking forward to really working and continuing to partner with the brokerage to continue to drive change.
Thank you, Natasha. So I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Sunil Dhall. Sunil has been the Chief Financial and Operating Officer of Peel Hunt for the past 11 years, and earlier this year joined a Treasury task force looking at improving socioeconomic diversity at senior levels in UK financial and professional services. This is also a really interesting thing for me because I think you're in 100 Liverpool Street, Sunil. That's right. And my very first job in the city, the placement I had with the brokerage back in 2004 was in 100 Liverpool Street. Again, I think this also kind of touches on on sort of the gap in perception. So, I guess a lot of you will know that the vast majority of employment in the UK is SMEs rather than kind of the large corporations. And Peel Hunt, as I understand it, is probably the largest broker when it comes to covering the SME, kind of small and mid caps. And again, this is one of these things that, we don't realize that these massive organizations sit behind, all the brands and companies that we deal with day to day. But I'll stop banging on about that. I'm pleased to say that Peel Hunt are one of our corporate partners and a member of the Corporate Leaders Forum. And I will pass on to you, Sunil. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. And funnily enough, just listening to your story, I was thinking how much of a parallel we had, and very similar to how Natasha was saying, actually yours and my story are similar. We're about 300 miles apart because I was born in Lancashire. I wasn't anywhere near London, but quite similar in terms of, grew up, but parents didn't go to university, didn't really know anything about the world that I now live in terms of the city and the legal profession, all of the things that we have in and around the city, not just financial services, and actually really that informed my choices for university and things like that, that now I sort of look back and think, oh, if I'd known a little bit more about things, I would, you know. So I think actually the work that the brokerage is doing, even just in the informative stage of getting that word out there, is super powerful, I think, really, really interesting. And I think that's one of the things that we love about the partnership that we have with the brokerage, is that we're hopefully getting the message out about the world of financial services and the legal profession and all of these different wonderful experiences, and actually echoing something that Caroline said actually as well about, you know, there's and something you've already mentioned, Mohammed, is that you don't realize that even within a bank, for instance, there's so many diverse roles that one can go for. You know, that includes not just the person, you know, so as you said, counting up the money from the business side, but it's also, you know, there's a marketing department, there's a legal function, there's HR departments, that, you know, so there's lots and lots of people doing lots of different things and really wide and varied roles that can actually cater for many things that many of the people are interested in going into work. So I think that's really important. I think for us, actually, I think we're the manifesto is really important. I think take my hat off to Catherine to coming up with this, because I think it really does drive, and something that we've been talking about on the City of London task force about data collection and driving change is about sometimes putting a number out there and actually just saying, here is what we want to do, you know, 100 paid internships, 100,000 hours of volunteering, you know, all of those things. Actually, the target drives change, and I think it's really important. And so we're definitely interested in signing up to a lot of these key requirements. You know, we're doing 4 internships ourselves. Unfortunately, not with the brokerage this year, because we'd always committed to another organization, but we will do that next year, I think, with the brokerage. You know, we're doing a lot of volunteering. You know, I can't remember now. I think Natasha actually said that it's super popular, the brokerage is volunteering, and you know, I think that's exactly the same for us. We get lots and lots of people signing up to do the broker, you know, whether it's the masterclasses or the boot camps. You know, we've got a few of those coming up as well. So really important, really impressive. And just touch on one other thing before I go, which I think is really important, is the data collection bit, which I don't think we've probably touched on too much. And it's definitely something where focus gone heavily in the City of London task force on the socioeconomic side. Is really about you know, encouraging firms, and that's a requirement on businesses going forward, to actually collect this socioeconomic data. It's becoming a little bit more normal, but it's still not required by, you know, you still have to get your staff and ask their permission, and they need to volunteer that information. And something that we're working on in my section of the task force is really about how do we get people from varied socioeconomic backgrounds up into the corporate ladder. You know, how do you make sure that they're getting up into the senior management positions? And actually, there's no way to know unless you collect that data. So I think, you know, we're really driving towards actually making sure that we collect that data, and I think there's hopefully a slightly more financial services citywide effort going to come along in the near future based on this task force. But I think, you know, that again, that collection of data is really important. I think, you know, again, I would say that's really worth firms signing up to that. That's probably enough from me, Mohammed. I'll pass back to you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joanna Brown. So Joanna is HR business partner at McGill and Partners, a boutique insurance brokerage established 2019, if I remember correctly. So this is another, sorry for banging on about stuff like this, but this is another really interesting thing for me, because again, one of those things I was unaware of, and even a few years into, you know, work, you know, kind of start of my career as well, was that the amount of things that you could insure against, like even stuff like the weather, and the fact that there were whole teams of people and employment opportunities tied to all of these types of insurance. So I'm pleased to say that McGill has taken a fresh approach to diversity and inclusion from the outset, and they are also a brokerage corporate partner. And with that, I would like to pass to Joanna.
Thanks, Mohammed. So just to give a bit of broader context about McGill and Partners, because we are still a relatively new firm, as Mohammed said, founded in 2019 by Steve McGill, who was the ex-president, group president of Aon. So we are a reinsurance broker, and actually we've got commitments as a firm, and we're very closely aligned to the brokerage in terms of that change making strand. So we said we'd be bold, be one team, and be change makers. So actually, as I say, very closely aligned from that perspective around effecting change. So we've only recently commenced our partnership with the brokerage. So we did so earlier this year. So relatively new corporate partner still, but we've already done some pretty great work together in terms of some masterclasses, some workshops, and lots of volunteers from the business extremely keen to get involved. So we've really been very busy over the last 2 years recruiting it and starting to essentially build the business. And we've now recruited over 300 people. So we've got a real opportunity. We've obviously had and continue to have a real opportunity in terms of building a diverse colleague base. So our ultimate aim is to get to around 500 to 600 people. So we're about halfway through that kind of that journey now. So as I say, lots of opportunity moving forwards to make sure that we're getting this right. So in December of the year December 2020, we actually launched our own manifesto around diversity and inclusion. And we launched a number of initiatives, including colleague representation groups, reverse mentoring, obviously what we call partnering with purpose, and the brokerage is obviously one of our key partners as part of that. And also our leadership have made commitments in terms of diversity and our approach to diversity within the firm. I think importantly though, everyone, and what I've really seen since I joined, I've been with the firm 18 months now, is that it's widely recognised that I think historically the insurance industry has really failed in terms of diversity, and that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we're really kind of keen to be driving that through the work that we're doing with the brokerage. So one of the biggest challenges that I think we have, and actually Caroline touched on this as well, is actually around awareness of the insurance industry and the opportunities that it presents. I think, Mohammed, as you said, whatever interests someone might have, whether that's in sports, whether that's in aviation, whether it's in shipping, for example, there's a route or a career in insurance that will get you quite close to working with something that you really enjoy doing, because actually most things touch some form of insurance. So awareness is a huge barrier, I would say. And actually on Friday last week, myself and two colleagues went into a college that we were actually introduced to by the brokerage. We attended an assembly, and in that assembly I asked, I think there was probably 60 or 70 maybe students in the room, if anyone had considered a career in insurance, and actually no one put their hand up, which I think is really indicative of actually you just don't know about it leaving school, and perhaps actually only those that have, whether a family member or a family friend who works in the industry, that can kind of point them in that direction and say, actually, this is a really great career, why don't you think about it? Which ultimately leads to essentially a lack of diversity within insurance as a whole. So that's one of the barriers that I'm hoping that through our work with the brokerage and the outreach side, working with the schools, we can start to affect some change there. So we're absolutely completely supportive of the Opening Doors Manifesto, and we're actively working in ways to support young people and provide opportunities following the pandemic. So just as an example of that, we're actually launching an apprenticeship programme this year, which will commence in September, and the brokerage have advertised that for us, both through their candidate pool and actually through outreach into schools as well. So I'm hoping that come September time, we'll have 8 brokerage candidates joining us. So we're really excited about that opportunity and being able to provide those opportunities for the young people. We're also committed in terms of supporting with the volunteering hours that have been asked, and also we've been very clear and transparent around our KPIs. So if you were to go onto the McGill and Partners website, you can see all of our diversity metrics actually published on there, which includes all of the information around ethnicity and also socioeconomic background. So in terms of that data, I think we're in complete agreement really that it's actually really important for us to understand where we're at the moment, and what we need to do to make sure that actually our firm is representative of the community that we work within. And one thing I've been really really excited to see is the amount of engagement that we've had within the firm, actually from long-standing members of the industry, and how excited they are about working with the brokerage, which really is, I think, indicative of the appetite to change the sort of status quo of things. So just to touch on data again, come back to that. So we ask all of our colleagues at McGill and Partners to complete information around their diversity, around their backgrounds. And obviously we put that in the context of it is important for us to understand where we're at. But also I think one of the things that's really helpful to do is provide the context of actually compared to, for example, the Office of National Statistics, which I think is a really good indicator of actually how diverse you are as an organisation and whether you are representative of that wider community. So I think putting it into context is actually a really valuable way of sort of helping colleagues understand why you're asking for that information, because actually sometimes that socio-economic data can feel quite personal and people don't feel actually that willing to provide it. So I think putting it into context and sort of explaining why you're looking at it is a really important thing to do when gathering that information. So I think that's probably me in terms of McGill and Partners.
Thank you so much. So we do have a bit of time for questions. Now, I actually haven't run a Q&A over Zoom before, but as I understand it, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and submit a question. And I'm not sure actually if it's possible for people to for us to bring people up to the panel to ask the question. But if you're able to post your question in the Q&A, we'll see it straight away. And if we can bring you up, we will. I've got, oh, we've had a question already. Okay. So in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of interest in this space, in diversity and inclusion. What would you say needs to be done to really have an impact going forward? There's a related question that we also have, which might link in, which you should also think about, I hope, which is what are the challenges that you're having in your sector in terms of making progress? And if you're able to speak about your organisation as well, that would be helpful. Does anyone want to?
I'm happy to go first. I think we've touched on this earlier in terms of challenges for the sector, and I think it is letting people know that we're there, the variety of the roles, and also perception. You know, I think sometimes people, you know, maybe have watched television and films and have got an idea of what the industry might be like. And it really isn't like that, which is why I think we have this responsibility to actually get ourselves out there and do something about that. And that links into the question about, you know, what will have a real impact. And it's that quote, isn't it, around do what you always did, get what you always got. You know, we've got to do things differently. We've got to take action. And I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a series of things, and I think it's persistent nudges and keeping on going. You know, we can't just expect to do something once and that, oh great, everyone's going to know about us and that's going to change everything. So I think long-term impact is around long-term action and doing things differently is what I would say.
Thank you. Natasha, do you want to come in?
Sure. I think in terms of what steps need to be taken, I agree with Caroline. I don't think it's one thing. But I do think accountability is really important, having very specific, identifiable and achievable goals, and then being held accountable for them. And we did a very interesting exercise the latter half last year. We had an external consultancy come in and really look at everything we were doing right and everything we were doing wrong, and all the staff were spoken to, all the lawyers were spoken to. We had focus groups, and the report made pretty hideous reading, if I'm honest. It was really hard. But without that data, I wasn't able to work with my diversity council to build a strategy, to set targets, not just in numbers, but in goals, and be held accountable. So I think accountability is really important, and really understanding where you're going wrong and why you're going wrong is important. And a lot of the issues come from senior leadership, frankly. You know, the lip service is given, but actually there's a generation above all of us who don't necessarily value diversity or understand its importance in the same way. So starting change from top down is also important. In terms of the barriers to the legal industry, I think, again, as Caroline says, it's a perception issue that is difficult to get into. It is. It's expensive as well. You know, you've got university, if you do the conversion, you've got a year of conversion, then you've got bar school or solicitor's school, and it's expensive. However, there are scholarships available, there is sponsorship available, and actually you can navigate your way through that even without the financial means. And I was fortunate enough to get scholarships and also work part-time, but it's achievable. And I think people feel that is a barrier to actually, particularly from a different socioeconomic background, to having a career in the law. And I think educating them about the options available, which means they're not going to have to spend hundreds of thousands, they can be supported and they can make it through, is really important.
Thank you. Sunil, I noticed you unmuted. Did you?
Yes, yeah, thanks, Mohammed. I mean, I agree with what Natasha and Caroline were saying. I think it's something that needs to be from the top down. You know, there's definitely a senior leadership challenge in organizations. In our organization, for example, you know, we're a smaller organization, but and we've had very, very low turnover of staff as we've grown over the last 10 years, but we've still had low turnover of staff, and actually that has meant quite a difficult challenge on diversity. You know, we're not just turning people over on a regular basis, and so it's recruiting in the right pools, getting more diverse pools where we're recruiting from. Working with great organizations like the Brokerage is helping with that, but it's a smaller change in something that needs a sort of bigger push, I think, and that you know, you can go to all the same recruitment firms that I'm sure Caroline and Natasha and Joanna go to, and they're filled with very similar candidates who probably go to all the same, you know, so it's trying to go away from your normal sources, I think, is really important. But things like, you know, and I suffer from it myself because you know, I'm unconsciously biased just in the way that I am, and everyone is, you know, everyone is unconsciously biased, and actually really understanding that and really changing the way that you look at new recruits or potential recruits, I think, is really important. So that's a key focus for us as well. We've done all the sort of training, but it's not just tick box. You know, we've done some unconscious bias training. It's actually really making sure it's within the process, and it changes the way that you actually think about recruitment. And we are doing that a little bit. We're doing a lot more management training on that. So it's really important to focus on where you're getting people from and then how they're coming into the organization.
Yeah. Sorry, Joanna, I noticed you'd unmuted. Yeah.
So there's just a couple of thoughts that I had. I think one being around transparency. So I know feedback from one of the previous brokerage sessions I've held attended has really been around, actually, one of the barriers for diverse talent coming into an organisation can be that they can't see role models within that firm that they recognise as being similar to themselves. So I think actually being quite transparent and being quite clear about kind of what the makeup of your firm looks like, and putting that forward perspective candidates to see when they're looking to apply to a firm. I think that's a real positive step actually towards change. And I also, just to touch on the point Natasha made around actually the expense of moving into some professions, it can be costly in terms of university and otherwise. And actually, I think there's probably more that could be done around promoting apprenticeships, because actually so much has changed over the last, I don't know how many years, but there's actually routes into a lot of different professions now through apprenticeships, which enables people to both work and gain professional qualifications at the same time. So I think if you're someone who's looking at university and thinking, actually, do I want to get myself into a position where I've got lots of fees that I need and debt that I need to pay off, actually apprenticeships are a really good route as well now into professional jobs and professional organisations. So I think that's something that partly through the work we're doing, we can look to promote those alternative routes as well.
We've had two questions come in. I think they are related, so I'll read them both out. So the first question says, we find it challenging to obtain buy-in and commitment from line managers to support the programme, often concerns about resourcing constraints. Do we have any examples of specific challenges that line managers have faced and how the company or the brokerage can support that? And the second question I think is related, and I'll explain in a minute why I think it's related. So within your organization and companies that you work with, do we find that senior leaders have truly embraced the business case for diversity of employees, as a way to prevent groupthink and enhance creative problem solving? Or is it more a case of, we should do this because it's the right thing to do, so it's like a secondary priority versus the rest of the business's goals? I thought I would offer on the first question around kind of challenge for getting line manager support. So the brokerage runs a small program for RBC at the moment called the RBC Academy, and one of the ways we've sort of helped kind of institutionally sort of support those line managers is, I understand of course a lot of firms work in a similar way where every quarter, you do your numbers with finance, your headcount, obviously your HR cost is a big part of it. In being in finance, we don't have any plant and machinery, right? It's all people. And, it can be quite difficult on an investment team if they've got one vacancy for a portfolio manager, if they need to create another headcount to then support our program. So what we have internally is we have, I assume there's some variation is possible, across the other firms in the sector, is that we sort of have like a department structure where someone in one department can report to another person. So centrally, we have senior buy-in to support the program, and the headcount is created at that level, and a sort of a pseudo department is created to support the headcount for this program. And all the trainees go into that program, and then individually they have their own line managers in the relevant businesses. So that way, the line managers don't see the headcount. When they do their numbers with finance, it doesn't come off their number. But what's critical to this is having that senior buy-in, because of course you can't take that problem away from your line managers without that senior buy-in. So would I be able to ask one of you to perhaps come in and give me your thoughts on that?
Mohammed, I'm happy to add to that, because I feel also it links to Buket's question around what really needs to change to have an impact. And I suppose it's really understanding as to why we haven't had a change so far and how it all interlinks. So I would absolutely agree with what the panelists said in terms of having that senior buy-in, and that's in some ways why we've changed our partnership model and strategy, that we don't work with CSR departments exclusively now. That's not our starting point. We start from the top. We work with CEOs and the C-suite executive, and and I'm having a conversation at the beginning of the partnership to really find out, are you really committed to this and in there for the right reason? And only if the answer is yes, then we actually can work with you, because otherwise it is really hard for us to have an impact. But then the second bit, and that sort of answers that question on alignment, is we really ought to bridge the intention to action gap. So, the intention is great, but then, where we see things falling down is actually the practical action and capability of, the people who have to make it happen. And that's why, I'm so passionate about line manager support. And next year, we're going to do a whole lot more around this, because, and I think that's one of the weaknesses the debate has had so far, that we've actually never openly discussed that managing a diverse team is actually really hard. But that's okay, because, the benefits definitely outweigh the difficulties, but it is hard, and nobody has been honest about this so far. And I think we just have to admit to that, and we have to explore why it is hard, and then we have to support people. And so, we've started to develop some modules around that in terms of getting line managers to understand the lived experience of our young people, etc. But it's just really, if the commitment from the top is there, then you have to also have that honesty around, it is hard, and that people need support and invest in that, really. And I think that would probably make a big difference.
Sunil and Natasha, do you mind if I bring you in on the latter question? I mean, you both sit on the board of your respective firms, and the question around whether this is a secondary priority versus the business's other goals.
I mean, for us, it's definitely not a secondary priority. So I think the question was about, the business case for diversity. Diverse teams and diverse firms create better outcomes. Sorry, we've got some building work going on, so you might be able to hear that in the background. But I think the for us, I think there's so much information out there and evidence out there that shows that is the case. I mean, one of our values is do the right thing anyway. So we're already on that secondary point anyway. So we would be doing that. But I think there's so much evidence out there for why this makes sense. We just created a ESG committee within our organisation at the board level. So just underneath the board level, that now looks at things in a little bit more strategic, obviously not just diversity and inclusion, but other areas. But it takes a holistic view of the whole point. And I think that sets, when we're looking to set a strategy across the whole organization, that then will feed into everything that we want to do for the next 5 years. So that's actually us taking it much more seriously and more holistically at the top than we have probably. But we've been doing some great initiatives, actually a lot of them staff-led, and there's the whole there's been a groundswell of kind of focus for us within the organization that's really pushed this to the top of the agenda.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's taken a long time to get senior leadership there, if I'm honest. That's partly because there's as I said and alluded to before, there is an older generation in the States who sit on the board, by which I mean in their sort of 70s. And they got it intellectually, but they kind of probably humoured me a little bit about it. What's changed are a few things. One, the clients. You cannot go to pitch now without having a diverse team. It translates into winning business. So that was a mechanism of sort of education. Actually, unless we do this, we are going to lose work, we'll lose revenue and the like. That was one aspect. The second aspect was training the executive committee, both on unconscious bias, but all the other things that go through, microaggressions and the like. And that was, I think, an eye-opener for them. So yes, as a firm, and certainly as sort of deputy chair, it's absolutely a primary commitment because I believe so passionately in it. I think I would be naive to say that in every institution, all of senior leadership is brought in 100% or really understands it. I think my institution has made really good progress through a combination of training and understanding, the importance and the success that diversity brings in their own terms. But it's far from an uphill struggle.
Thank you so much, Natasha. I really appreciate your candid comments on this. So we are at the hour, and I would like to thank you all for attending. Some of you will have read the science about these virtual meetings being so much more draining on our mental energy than meeting in person. So I do really appreciate you giving us this hour. So we will be following up on email with more information, but if you can't wait, you can of course contact Katrina or any of the brokerage team. And if you are a member, if you're joining as part of the alumni panel, could I please ask you to stay online, as we will start that right after this. And finally, I would like to thank you all, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.